Leonardo da Vinci is one of these unmistakably queer figures who were pivotal to the Renaissance. This polymath was born in Tuscany in 1452, the illegitimate son of a Florentine legal notary and an orphaned woman. Despite his unremarkable origins and struggles with writing, he was left handed. Leonardo was excellent at just about everything. Da Vinci started out as a studio assistant to painter and sculptor Andrea del Verrocchio, under whom other brilliant Renaissance artists like Botticelli also studied. In his late teens, Leonardo would become Verrocchio's apprentice and mastered not just painting and sculpting, but other technical skills like mechanics, which revolutionized his practice. He became an expert on anatomy, working to understand the mechanics of the human body and recreate them accurately on the page. His Virtue in Man sketch is a particularly famous example. Da Vinci blended art and mathematics to render realistic illustrations of his own inventions, including the helicopter and the parachute, which, which centuries later have come to fruition. These sketches have been repeatedly deemed the work of a true genius. Yet some of them compared his paintings, which are among the most famous artworks in the world. But there is one detail that is often overlooked: the model. Leonardo painted person one person more than any other, a young man named Gian Giacomo Caparotti, who Da Vinci nicknamed Sali, meaning little devil. Sali came to study under Da Vinci when he was just 10 years old and was Da Vinci's companion for years. Eventually, the two became lovers in what was presumably a pedestrian relationship. Da Vinci never seemed to tire of Sali's angelic face and curls. His wildly homoerotic portrait of John the Baptist holding a suggestive finger in the air is widely believed to be based on Sali. Slightly less is the suggestion that if you look at John the Apostle to the left of Jesus in Da Vinci's celebrated Last Supper, you'll see Sali again. Finally, and most controversial, Mona Lisa herself is said to be Da Vinci's male lover. This theory was spearheaded by Italian researcher and art detective Silvano Vassetti in 2016, after he used infrared technology to compare the paintings of Sali with the Mona Lisa. Vassetti noted striking similarities between the two faces, particularly around the nose, the forehead, and that famous smile. Leonardo da Vinci finished the Mona Lisa in France, and if you take the letters in Mona Lisa and rearrange them, you'll get Mon Sali, meaning my Sali in French. Perhaps it is pure coincidence, or perhaps it was a code, a queer love letter to Sali, hidden in the most famous painting of all time. And here, if you can see it, is that painting that they were talking about. I mean, I kind of see the similarities between the Mona Lisa and that. Throughout concentrated, though concentrated in Italy, the Renaissance was a period of cultural reckoning across Europe when the dominant ideologies of the previous centuries were all up for debate. Not even the might of the Catholic Church could escape the scrutiny of this new era. Throughout the Middle Ages, the church had grown extremely wealthy off the people, and it showed in the gilded castles and decadent churches occupying prime real estate in every city. The cracks of corruption were beginning to show, and they caught the eye of a German man named Martin Luther. Luther believed that instead of getting the word of God from the Pope, who he suspected was more focused on decadence and power than worship, people should actually pick up the Bible. Luther's back to basic approach to Christianity won him a dedicated following, and as a result, the Catholic Church splintered and new branches of Christianity emerged. One of them was named after Luther himself, Lutheranism. And this, along with other new branches, fell under what we know as Protestantism. This brand of Christianity centered around the scriptures and involved each person making a personal covenant with God. The rise of Protestantism had the secondary effect of increasing literacy, because Protestants were actually required to read the Bible, whereas under the Catholic Church, you had the clergy to tell you what to do. This development, combined with the emergence of the printing press in Europe, meant many more people had access to the Bible, and as a result, were introduced to our old friends in the book of Leviticus and Sodom and Gomorrah. Historians tend to describe this period as the Reformation, as it marked a series of reforms to Christianity. The first Reformation, which swept across continental Europe, was soon followed by English Reformation. This too was characterized by a shift towards Protestantism, but for a slightly different reason. The King of England wanted a divorce. The Roman Catholic Church refused to allow this. So, in a fairly audacious power move, the king decided to make his own religion, which he was the head of, the Church of England. As you might have guessed, this brand new Christianity was fine with divorce. He decreed his new church the only official church of England. However, winding back centuries of Catholic influence was always going to be a big ask. He needed a way to wrench power away from the Catholic Church. During this period, some offenses still came under the jurisdiction of the ecclesiastical courts, which reported into Rome. Sodomy, which in England was called buggery, was one such offense. In a breathtakingly petty move that would go on to cause centuries of pain, the king made buggery a civil offense, signing into law the Buggery Act of 1533. Now, for the first time, there was a civil law prohibiting sodomy. This would form the precedent for anti-homosexual laws around the world. In other words, he has a lot to answer for. But the fun doesn't end there. Some people in England believed that the Church of England was stopping short of its Protestant potential. So a group of fundamentalist Protestants emerged. This group, known as the Puritans, made life very difficult for those who were same-sex attracted. Puritans lived lives of restraint, eschewing all earthly pleasures in favor of worshiping and studying the Bible. They loathed all things frivolous, but none more than the theater. Oh, the cross-dressing. They really hated that. William Shakespeare is widely regarded as the greatest writer of the English language, and his stories tap into the human condition so well they feel eternally relevant. As well as his mastery of words, Shakespeare's ideas of genders were way ahead of their time. During this period, the theater was a popular part of English life and a solid source of entertainment. Women, however, weren't allowed to perform on stage. They were required to remain pious at all times and absolutely could not take part in such an ungodly spectacle. Women performing for an audience in exchange for money was associated with sex work, which was considered extremely ungodly. Shakespeare navigated this by having boys play women's roles. It may have been better than women participating in these intolerable mischiefs to the churches, as Puritan William Preen described it, but the Puritans were horrified by the idea of cross-dressing, especially if it continued off stage. Although the Puritans had a lot of power, it appears that Shakespeare actually baited them into his plays. In As You Like It, Shakespeare weaves the act of cross dressing into the story, writing a female character who dresses in men's clothing. Surely, this boy dressing as a woman, dressing as a man situation could only be some kind of Puritan dog whistle. In The Twelfth Night, Shakespeare goes even further, including another deliberately cross dressing character, but also a Puritan character, Mavelio, who is portrayed as hypocritical, selfish, and power hungry. It would have been highly risky for Shakespeare to invert gender roles the way he did, so we can only assume that these choices were deliberate. Perhaps an act of defiance in protest, or some side of camp inside joke. Shakespeare's own gender and sexuality are the subject of constant debate. He was married to someone named Anne Hathaway, which birthed the conspiracy theory that the modern actress Anne Hathaway's husband, Adam Schulman, is actually a reincarnation of Shakespeare. There's a striking resemblance between the two, and they had children. However, at this time, marriage, love, and sex remain separate spheres. Many of his sonnets appear to be directed towards a young man and contain homoerotic wordplay. Of course, poetry isn't always biographical, but a good many Shakespeare scholars believe that his sexuality aligned with what today might be called bisexual or queer. And let's face it, any enemy of the Puritans was probably a friend of ours. With all sorts of lewd, ungodly spectacles cropping up, the Puritans began to feel the Church of England was beyond reform. Their initiatives to cleanse the people of sin and refocus them on the study of the Bible were proving futile. They needed a place where they could practice their branch of Protestantism freely and banned all the ghastly things that horrified them, such as long hair, slashed sleeves, and lace with gold thread. So, when word spread of a new land, one not even mentioned in the Bible, the Puritans seized the opportunity to spread their faith with fever. They soon found themselves on board a boat to New England, which would come to be known as America. There was only The only problem was they had no business being there.